On today's show, a story about the greatest gift we Minnesotans voted to give to ourselves. A gift? Yes, to preserve and restore our wetlands, prairies, streams, rivers, and forests. And it only cost us 4 cents. Well, sort of.
Minnesota Bound. Brought to you by Minnesota's select GMC dealers.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this special edition of Minnesota Bound. When it comes to miracles, Minnesota has had its share. In 1971, the legislature, along with the late Governor Wendell Anderson, passed new tax policy that became known as the Minnesota Miracle. In 1973, Time magazine hailed Minnesota as the state that works, featuring Governor Anderson on the cover holding up a northern pike. Today, there's a new Minnesota miracle at work, perhaps the greatest of them all, that helps all of us, including, oddly enough, that northern pike. In 2008, Minnesotans went to the polls and overwhelmingly passed what's known as the Clean Water, Land, and Legacy Amendment, designed to protect and preserve the state's water, fish and wildlife, parks and trails, and the arts. It's been called the largest state conservation program in America's history. Now, to pay for it, Minnesotans also voted to tax themselves, raising their sales tax by 3/8 of 1%. How much is that? It's 4 cents on a $10 purchase. 4 cents. In this program, we will explore the work of only one of the legacy funds, the Outdoor Heritage Fund, dealing with the restoration, protection, and enhancement of wetlands, prairies, forests, and habitat for fish, game, and wildlife. Now, how the Fish and Wildlife Habitat money is spent is recommended by the Lessard-Sams Council, composed of 8 citizens and 4 legislators. In the spirit of full disclosure, I've been a member of the council, serving my second 4-year term. Now, as an outdoor enthusiast myself, I happen to think I'm getting my 4 cents worth. I hope you agree. So join us as we explore another Minnesota miracle, one I like to call our greatest gift to ourselves.
Take a look. These are some of the gifts so far. Who could have imagined? Newborn prairies, converting barren land to lush native flora waving in the breeze. Wetlands restored. A mud hole becomes a living marsh, rich with life. Trout streams, ravaged over time by man and nature, restored as a waterway of trout haunts and pastoral beauty. And we've only just begun. Oddly enough, our gift to ourselves was born out of distrust of the legislature. State voters insisted on guarantees that if they voted to increase their sales tax, the money would be spent for fish and wildlife habitat and not diverted to something else. Gary Leaf explains.
Well, the reason is that sportsmen in particular and conservationists said, look, we're not going to pass something and have it approved and the money approved and not have a system in place right out of the gate that would help determine how the money would be spent. And we were adamant about that.
Leaf and his organization played a major role campaigning for laws to safeguard the expected tax revenue. As a result, before the Legacy Amendment ever appeared on a ballot, a transparent system to spend fish and wildlife habitat dollars, the Lessard-Sams Council, had already been created by the legislature.
We really pushed very, very hard on that the money that would be used in the Outdoor Heritage Fund had a governance system on it, that this is not a vote in vain. Our messaging seemed to resonate, and people have a strong heart and passion in this state for conservation. They just do.
With the Lessard-Sams Council in place, voters overwhelmingly approved adding the Legacy Amendment to Minnesota's Constitution, despite opposition from the state's largest newspaper, the Star-Tribune. In 2009, the sales tax increase began to flow to restore, protect, and enhance Minnesota's natural resources. And the council began its work. Executive Director Mark Johnson.
The Lessard Sam's Outdoor Heritage Council was set in statute to make recommendation for allocations from, or appropriations from, the Outdoor Heritage Fund, the fund that's used for habitat in Minnesota. What doesn't qualify is non-habitat things. So let's say research, that doesn't qualify. Another example would be, even though it's nature-related, a learning center, an environmental learning center, would not qualify.
More of the miracle. Although the Outdoor Heritage Fund receives just 1/3 of the sales tax collected, the 3/8 of 1% in recent years has amounted to an astounding $100 million or more a year.
Probably the most dramatic thing, as I look at it, is that these are dollars that there's no way Minnesota would have worked them into our budget, into the state budget. There's no way that these monies would have been available for working on habitat if it hadn't been for the citizens voting upon themselves this new sales tax.
In less than a decade, the legislature has approved, via the Legacy Amendment, about $850 million for fish and wildlife habitat projects.
So far, about between 500 and 600,000 acres in Minnesota have been protected, restored, enhanced. There's no doubt in my mind that it's changing the landscape of Minnesota, and it's changing it forever.
Up next, starting from scratch, almost, restoring wetlands to the Minnesota landscape.
Minnesota Bound is brought to you by Minnesota Select GMC dealers, Rapala, Star Bank, and by Hewitt Docks, Lifts, and Pontoon Lakes.
Up next, the subject is wetlands. Lord knows we've drained lots of them. So now your tax money has been used to bring some of them back.
Minnesota's history has not always been kind to wetlands. Some folks call them swamps. Farmers drain them, cities and suburbs drain them. Sometimes it seems only red-winged blackbirds, ducks, and waterfowl hunters appreciate wetlands.
Unfortunately, we've lost most of our wetlands. Over 90% of our wetlands and nearly all of our native prairie are gone. So the legacy we need to leave is to restore some of those wetlands.
As early as 1858, the year Minnesota became a state, Minnesota has wanted to get rid of wetlands, especially in agricultural areas. By 1930, more than 5 million acres of wetlands for wildlife were gone from the landscape, now dominated by fields of corn and soybeans. An effort to preserve the remaining wetlands started in the 1950s, but it wasn't enough, and drainage continued. In Lac-Qui-Parle County, in one township, a survey showed there were 1,668 acres of wetlands in 1954, reduced to 627 acres in 1962, and even fewer than 400 by 1972. It's fair to ask, unless you're a duck, who cares if wetlands are disappearing? The answer is, you should if you like cleaner water, less flooding, and more wildlife. Consider the case of Smith Lake in Wright County. In 2009, Ducks Unlimited used your sales tax dollars to begin the transformation of a mud hole, Smith Lake, to what Smith Lake used to be, a wetland rich with wildlife.
We take a degraded, shallow lake that's turbid, full of carp, no aquatic plants or invertebrates, and no wildlife using that lake, and do a temporary 2-year drawdown and bring it back to life, clear the water up, bring the plants back, the birds respond, everything from shorebirds to ducks and geese, That's really a super outcome there, and it's very conspicuous. You can see the change.
In Otter Tail County, another wetland, abused for years by high water, was brought back to life. Today, DNR, Ducks Unlimited, and other conservation organizations are seeking opportunities to restore wetlands previously drained. One such is called the David B. Jones Tract, named after the farmer who, in his will, directed that drained wetlands on poor farmland be restored.
Taking a drained wetland that's maybe a wet farm field that produces a crop once every other year and restoring the water back there and bringing the prairie back around it with the wildflowers and everything from monarchs to mallards.
While the value of wetlands goes beyond birds and pretty flowers, restoring and protecting wetlands isn't a cheap idea.
We're right at about the $50 million mark in the last 10 years, and we've restored, hundreds of wetlands, tens of thousands of acres.
So far, your sales tax dollars alone have restored, protected, or enhanced more than 61,000 acres of wetlands. And the task continues. Coming up, are Minnesota prairies, lakes, and fish?
Doubles, man.
All need love, too.
Closed captioning is brought to you by Connecticut.
Coming up, we'll look at how your tax money is being used to restore prairies and grasslands, plus protect our lake shores and provide habitat to fish, including that northern pike I mentioned.
Besides draining wetlands, Minnesota has been plowing under native prairies and grasslands for more cropland. Today, the goal of organizations such as Pheasants Forever, the Nature Conservancy, and others is to protect what remains and restore prairie that once was.
To date, Pheasants Forever has expended protecting and enhancing just over $100 million worth of acres in the state, and we've brought $42 million in match to the table to get those projects done. Before the Legacy Amendment, we could acquire just a fraction, protect and restore a fraction of what we can today.
Unless you're a hen pheasant looking for a place to nest, who cares about the decline of grassland in Minnesota? Good question. The answer?
Well, you'd see a lot of good wildlife habitat. You'd see a lot of wetlands. You'd see a lot of upland, grasslands. You see a lot of pheasants, a lot of ducks, a lot of songbirds. You'd see a lot of pollinators. And the local community would see a lot more clean water.
Since 2009, roughly $260 million has been spent to protect or restore more than 290,000 acres of prairie and grasslands. In addition, many farmers and landowners have donated their land in the name of more grassland and improved water quality.
They wanted to leave a legacy, and they contributed land value to make sure that we could protect their property forever. I grew up hunting and fishing along the banks of the Crow River in Delano, Minnesota, and there's no place I'd rather be spending time with my family than outdoors. And I think what I grew up doing, I want my kids and their kids and all future generations to have that opportunity to do the same thing.
Not surprisingly, Minnesotans feel the same way about their lakes, rivers, and streams. Today, roughly 60 miles of trout streams in the state have been enhanced or restored, and dozens of miles of lakeshore have protection from development, thanks to DNR and organizations such as the Trust for Public Lands, Minnesota Land Trust, and the Lake Superior Steelhead Association. One One of the biggest fish habitat players is Minnesota's Trout Unlimited members.
We're doing these projects for the trout, all trout anglers, not just members of Trout Unlimited, and we're trying to create good habitat, fishable habitat, regardless of whether you're a bait fisherman, spin fisherman, fly fisherman. And so having good accessible places has meant more people outdoors, enjoying the outdoors. So certainly for the trout, it's been a boon, but it's been a boon for trout anglers as well.
Hay Creek near Red Wing is a shining example of positive change.
That stream was very wide, and so it could not move its sand. So it was shallow, sandy, very wide, toppling trees, and just kind of a box elder corridor of a mess where nobody fished it because you couldn't hardly get through it. And now that stream is probably half the width, nice slope banks. It's all, the sand is flushed out, it's all gravel, cobble, holes. That's pretty dramatic. Typically, it's about a 10-fold increase in trout numbers once we've done a project. So it's a huge boost.
Trout rivers on the North Shore also have been fixed up and repaired to once again function as habitat for migrating steelhead trout from Lake Superior. So much water, so many needs.
I don't think we'll ever catch up, but we'll get more. We'll get more and check them off the list and keep going.
Up next, preserving some of Minnesota's natural landscape is no small task. Is it an impossible dream?
Minnesota Bound is brought to you by Ice Castle Fish Houses and by Totem Resorts, the premier destination for world-class fishing.
By now, you should get the idea there's lots of work to do. So now we'll look at, say, forest management. How about big projects like saving the St. Louis River at its mouth in Duluth? And local conservation groups now have funds to help improve their own backyard.
Minnesota's forested lands, abundant, yes, and highly valued by hunters, hikers, campers, and the like. One of the largest projects ever approved by the Lessard-Sams Council opened to the public more than 190,000 acres of private land in northern Minnesota. The public can use it for hunting, trail riding on ATVs or snowmobiles, and other uses. The price tag, $36 million. But the public easement agreement is forever. Your sales tax dollars also reach local projects. Under a Conservation Partners program for organizations such as sportsmen's groups and city councils, hundreds of projects and more than $45 million in grants have been awarded locally the last 8 years. Perhaps most surprising, despite the many achievements of the Outdoor Heritage Fund, a great majority of Minnesotans have no clue. In a statewide survey in 2016, more than 90% of those surveyed could not name any of the funds supported with their sales tax. No matter, the gifts to ourselves keep coming in the form of cleaner water, more wildlife, and a happier state of mind. All for just pennies. 4 cents sales tax on a $10 purchase. 4 cents. Our greatest gift to ourselves.
Now I hope you'll understand why I like to call it our greatest gift to ourselves. What's more, Minnesota will be in better shape with its natural resources as we pass it on to the next generation. That too is a great gift. Well, thanks for watching. Remember, introduce a kid to the great outdoors. I'm Ron Shira.
Transportation provided by Premier Transportation. Call 1-800-899-7433. To get more Minnesota Bound, including full episodes, go to mnbound.com. And to follow our latest adventures, like us on Facebook.